attorney from the Chicago area, Attorney Jack Childs, who's going to be here to talk about part two of his, what I like to call his bamboozlement index and beyond. I just love that term. That's why I keep using it. And so I want to bring him on so we can get this show on the road. Attorney Childs, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Dr. Newton, and good morning to you and to your audience.
Well, good morning to you, and first of all, welcome back. We are glad to have you back. We had so many positive comments about your show the first time around that I'd be beaten up if I hadn't brought you back, because everybody wants to hear what you have to say. And I would like to, for those listeners who may have missed part one of this wonderful interview that we had, I would like to have you go back and start with that ruling, that determination that by Judge Taney as it relates to black folks in America, and then from there to state what its implications are for us today.
Thank you, Dr. Newton, and I can do that because that is the foundation of the premises that I put forth in whole and in part. And the basis of that is this. In 1857, Brother Dred Scott had been going through about 10 years worth of litigation. When people hear about the final result, they think, "Oh, the final result is 1857." No, he started about 10 years before that. Mm-hmm. The question he brought before the court was this: he, his wife, and his two daughters said that I hate to use this word, but I got to use it. Their owner had taken them from a slave state, and they had went to Ohio, and they had went to Missouri. And by the way, I have actually been to the courtroom in St. Louis, Missouri, where they actually granted him his initial status,
wow,
which was that he was in fact free when his owner took him from a slave state to a free state. I actually took some pictures in there. It was very moving, and the park is a national park. The courthouse is under the auspices of the National Park Service.
Wow.
So the ranger, who was a very nice Caucasian gentleman, these guys, what he did, he had some empathy for Dred Scott. As a matter of fact, listen to this. He said they have a ritual that when something happens, they go to Dred Scott's grave and put a Lincoln penny on it. Mm. Because in their mind, Lincoln freed the slaves, and on and on. So, I mean, it's a whole thing. But anyway, Dred Scott was declared to be free at one moment in that courtroom in St. Louis, Missouri. Let's say that was about 1852, 53, something like that. But in 1857, the United States Supreme Court issued a ruling which, in fact, overturned that ruling. Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court at that time, Roger B. Taney, authored the opinion. In the opinion, he stated unequivocally that Dred Scott, his wife, and two daughters didn't have, in essence, the humanity to claim their freedom. He said they weren't anything but an object of commerce. And then he went back and historiographically, as ancestor Anderson Thompson, Dr. Anderson Thompson used to always say, historiographically documented the purpose of why blacks were brought to America. He unequivocally stated, we didn't bring y'all here to become part of the body politic. We didn't bring y'all here to be participants in what we're doing. We brought you here, and listen to me very carefully, as articles of commerce. Articles of commerce. Mm-hmm. And commerce as defined in Black's Law Dictionary, the exchange of goods and services, in parentheses, especially on a large scale, into parentheses, involving transportation between cities, states, and countries. That's what we were. In other words, Roger B. Taney implemented the point of the non-humanity of people of African descent. And another thing I want to point out to the audience this morning, we have gone through all these metamorphoses talking about what we are. In this opinion, Roger B. Taney refers to us as Africans. And in essence, he refers to us as Africans. We brought these Africans here. And then he refers to us as Negroes. So it goes to the point in the 60s that was raised. We became Negroes. That's a categorization of us by another group. That's not what we are. And you remember there was a big fight about us being black, African American, colored, everything.
Right, right.
But in legal parlance, we were Africans. Everybody knew we were Africans. But we lost our Africanity because being an African is to be dangerous. Africans are not going to submit to bondage. Okay? They're not going to do it. They're going to fight, as they did on the ships. I read a book one time, a first-hand account by a ship's doctor who said he was writing his father all these letters. He said, I only took this job, Father, because I was just trying to make some extra money. I didn't know these people put up such struggles. He said, they fight on the land. They fight when they're putting them on the ship. They fight when they're in chains. They fight when they're getting off the ship. That's
really different than what a lot of people think. They think that our ancestors just went willy-nilly.
That's correct. That's correct. According to the ship, one of the ship's doctors, he said they fought all the way, and they won. Sometimes they actually thwarted being taken on the ship and hauled away across the ocean. They actually overturned some ships. They killed people on ships. Our ancestors were some bad folks. That's why we are like we are today. That's why you haven't Sankofa Radio. This is a remnant of that vestige of memory that we have. Okay? So, now Tony is saying that we are just property. Nothing more, nothing less. And property cannot declare itself free. Property has no rights. That's where you get this infamous phrase, and most black people quote is, the black man has no rights, which the white man is bound to respect. Well, that is one of the indices of the opinion, but the major portion of the opinion deals with our actual humanity, and that they don't consider us human. Therefore, we cannot be citizens. And therefore, only a citizen can come to court and ask for rights to be adjudicated. In other words, this is what people don't even talk about. He said, not only do you not have a right to be free, but you don't even have a right to come here because you're not a citizen.
You're not a human being. You're not a human being first.
That's right. You're not a human being first, but therefore you're not a citizen. Because only citizens can be human beings. In order to be a citizen, you got to be a human being. And so this is never discussed, it's not talked about, and it is the fulcrum of what we're living today. Because all through the history of the struggles of African men and women in this venue, I'm going to call this venue the United States of America, they have been forging protests to say, I'm human. And they have been forging protests to become accepted by white folks. And I had a discussion one day with Professor Hunter Adams, and we discussed that in terms of, we think that's a disease. Because if you live in your whole life to be accepted by people who don't even think you're human, you sick because you don't think you human. You don't think you are worthy. You have to be acknowledged. Your imprimatur of life must be bestowed on you by another group of people. That's insanity.
Validation.
Yes,
is what you're saying.
Validation. Hey, I know you would come up with the correct psychiatric term, but just us laymen and lay women, it's an illness. So we suffer from this illness. Now, you have to understand that this opinion was rendered. It was the law of the land. Dred Scott and his wife and 2 daughters were rebuked in this opinion. I think something else happened to them later on. They got free. I can't remember the whole story right now, but the important part is what he said. So then we get to what? 1865. In 1865, the Civil War ends. But what people don't know is that they then debated the amendments they were going to proffer in regard to the newly freed Africans. So there was a debate, good people, over whether or not they would pass the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is the amendment that bars involuntary servitude, except when you're incarcerated. When you're incarcerated, you have no rights. That's another thing they got us on. So they just started incarcerating us after that, willy-nilly. But that's beside the point. The point is they fought long and hard. And guess what, people? See, this is why you have to read and study and know things. All black people today want to believe the Democratic Party is the party that helps black people. Well, that's nothing could be further from the truth. But my point is, when they were debating the 13th Amendment, the Democrats were against the passage of the 13th Amendment. It was Republicans like Thaddeus Stevens, who had a black mistress, which was his maid. If you ever see the movie Lincoln, they even portray that. Tommy Lee Jones played Thaddeus Stevens. And they show when he would come in his house and maid would say, "Master, let me take your coat," and blah, blah, blah. And then when people would visit him, she would be taking their coats if she was his maid. But at night, they showed them getting in the bed together. Because I was his woman. And he had kids by her. See, the European is divided into different subgroups. Depending on what subgroup you're in, determine how you treated your bondage offspring. The British denied the existence of their children. They didn't care. I can have 10 of them. I ain't claiming them. Outwardly. Look at Thomas Jefferson. Mm-hmm. He had all them kids by Sally Hemings. Wouldn't even free him while he was alive wouldn't even say these are my children. Okay? So
Right.
that's what was happening. That is Stevens, and there's another Republican famous guy, said, listen to this. If we don't give the newly freed bonds some reparations or something, they'll always be in trouble. There'll always be a bond in one shape, form, or fashion. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's what they said. And they are totally correct. My point that I'm getting to is this. After this year-long fight, and finally they convinced the Democrats, one of them or two of them, or how many of it took to pass the 13th Amendment. They passed it. But the 13th Amendment, along with the 14th Amendment, which came next, supersede the Dred Scott case, but do not overturn it. In other words, you put the Band-Aid on the scar, but you didn't heal the scar. So that language has never been repudiated. I don't care what people tell you, and people get in arguments with other lawyers, and the lawyer says, well, look here, it says right here in the 14th Amendment that, you know, we're citizens and we this, blah, blah. Citizenship was conferred. It was not conferred. It was written on a piece of paper. Because no other citizen group in the history of this country ever had to have a Civil Rights Act, a Voting Rights Act, or none of that. That's
none of the immigrants. None of the formal immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Hey, your president's grandfather immigrated from Germany.
Yes.
The vice president, I think his daddy might have come from something. The vice president, I think he a first-generation U.S. citizen. Our people been here for centuries. So it is the denial of black people that keeps us in this quandary, because they don't look at the facts. And it's the late great ancestor, Sister Frances Wilson used to always tell us, before she passed, she had a mantra: we must get in touch with the truth.
Right.
We must get in touch with the truth. See, we are in denial of the truth. That statement that Tawney said, I don't care how many statues they now want to take down of Tawney. Just think about it. They're taking Tawney statues down. They're taking Robert E. Lee statue down. They're taking Jefferson Davis statue down. But what's the big difference? Tawney never was a rebel. He was the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. They want to keep you dumb. He's not even in the same category as the other.
Right.
Why are they taking his statue down? Because they don't want Negroes to read. See, because if they take it down, then it's out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. And that's why my propensity is they should leave all the statues up, and we should take our children to the statues and say that was one of the worst men on us in the history of mankind.
Make them teachable moments. Making them teachable moments is what you're saying. Yes. Mm-hmm.
But see, when you take it down, you hide the truth. And we are not sophisticated enough to go find the truth out and promulgate it. Because we are still stuck on the mentality of a bondsman. How can I get a job? What's going to give me a job? Well, as long as you're working a job for somebody else, they still in control of you. They can make you do whatever they want to keep that job. And if you notice, other people from around the world come here. There's 3 notable groups that have made serious asset incursions in America. You don't see them protesting. You don't see them talking about no integration. You don't see them talking about, I want to go to church or get a haircut with you. Those 3 groups are the Chinese and American. Chinese come from, they did before COVID. They used to come to all the major cities in the United States twice a week I didn't even know they was coming to Chicago till I saw it myself. I couldn't believe it. Twice a week, big planes come to Chicago. So I know if they come to Chicago, they're going to New York, they're going to Philadelphia, they're going to Washington, D.C., they're going to Miami, they're going to Atlanta, they're going to Houston, and you know San Francisco was their original home base. So you know they're in San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Sacramento. You ain't heard them say nothing. Not a peep. Now,
right.
next we have the Arab incursion. You hear nothing from them. What they do, they come to America, they set up shops, and they have incursions into the black community. All these little stores where they sell all this junk to black people. Okay, think about it. But they have other big stores. They have filling stations, and they don't have regular filling stations a lot of times. They have the ones with the stores in it. Also, on that heels of them doing that, you have the East Indians. The East Indians own all the Dunkin' Donuts and Baskin Robbins. You can't go into one and they're not there because they own them all. They bought the franchise. You ain't never heard them say, well, we want to have a march. We think we're being discriminated against. Have you ever heard them say that?
No, not really.
Hey, because they taking care of business. They're doing what we should be doing. But the program against us has been so profound and so violent emotionally that we can't even do the basic thing, which is just get together with each other. You know, black people come, I ain't got no job. I ain't gonna do. When our people was in the South and they let them go in 1865, they ain't had no job, they ain't had no language, they didn't have no ability for most of them to read and write. But they took the skills they had and they started making money. And they took the skills they had and the few people that could read and write taught the other people how to read and write. And within a 30-year span, they increased the literacy rate by about 4 or 5%. That's unprecedented. So what happened to them black people? Bamboozled, doctor. They suffer from bamboozlement because black people talk the craziest talk in the world. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I don't mean to offend anybody, but this is how I see it. This whole last week, black people have been arguing about Kamala Harris. This is the most ridiculous discussions I've ever heard. First of all, you had a black president. He couldn't do nothing. He didn't do nothing. He don't want to do nothing. The first thing he said when he got into the White House was, don't bring me that old reparations talk. That was documented. He said it. So what do you think Kamala Harris going to do? She's even on one level more ambiguous than him. What do I mean by the ambiguity? First of all, Barack had a Caucasian mother and a Kenyan father. So he don't have a black American experience. He was just black in America. But he didn't have that experience. Now you have a sister, and I'll call her that because, hey, she went to a black school. She plays a black sorority. She did something. But she was born in San Francisco, but she was raised in Canada. Because guess what, people? Her daddy was half Canadian, half white, and Jamaican. And her mother was a full-blown East Indian who looked to be an East Indian of some color. That's where she get a color from. And I don't want to go into the whole thing about the origin of East Indians because, trust me, if you look at people that got color, them some African subcontinent people. But we're not going to argue that. I don't care what they want to be with us. I'm not arguing with them about that. There's two groups of them. The Brahmins are white. The rest of them are black. I was in Africa at the conference against racism, and the blackest people there was from India, the Dalits, what people want to call them untouchables. They were the blackest people there. And when I'm sitting in Africa.
That was at the Durban conference?
Yes. I was part of what they call the Durban 400. I went with the late ancestor Conrad Worrell.
Yes.
May peace be upon them.
Yes.
But I asked them, I said, man, I'm going to get this chance. Because, they're very standoffish. But that's their culture. Their culture teaches them to be haughty. So I said, why do you think they treat you this way? Guess what their response was? Because they know they took our land. Not because we black. Not because they white and we black, but because they took our land. So
before you go any further, let me just, for any of our listeners who are just coming on, I want to let you all know we are in this discussion with attorney Jack Childs, who is a businessman and a wonderful historian and really a great attorney from Chicago, who himself is giving us the lowdown, the 411, as it relates to our situation and the laws that have never been repealed on the books. Carry on. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. So we have now our people engaged in benign symbolism arguments. Nothing of substance. That's why I call it bamboozlement. It's benign, regardless of what you think about Kamala Harris. And some black people really have attacked her, saying she's this, she's that.
Well, that's so unnecessary.
Unnecessary. She's a politician. She's a politician. And she's been successful at being a politician, which means you have to compromise yourself. There are no more politicians like Adam Clayton Powell. All the rest of these people are bought and paid for. I mean, I don't want to offend anybody, but they survive on contributions so they can continue their work. They got to get contributions in order to stay in office. But that's another subject for another topic another day. But we have her being at the fulcrum. Now they discussing this and that. It's so wonderful and blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff. But it's nothing. And that's what we are doing. We talk about nothing all the time. And I'm going to give you another example of how they twisted us. We had a riot in Chicago a little over a week ago. Looters ran downtown to the most valuable real estate in Chicago, the Magnificent Mile.
Yes.
And busted out store windows, Gucci, Pucci, Fiorucci, and all that kind of stuff. They showed a bunch of black people doing it. Now, this is how far gone we are. We're in the age of facial recognition software. We're in the age of almost everything is on your license plate. If you got a car registered to you, they know your driver's license number. There's a picture on most jurisdictions' driver's license now, so they got a picture of you. I mean, this was insane. But the bamboozlement is, instead of them concocting something meaningful, they go steal brand name items that somebody else has put a value on. In other words, this is their thinking. I'll steal this Gucci and I'm going to resell it after you get out the penitentiary, maybe. Guess what they did? They started flashing pictures. The news media was at one site. I happened to be looking at it. I couldn't believe it. A brother and a sister parked their cars in front of an Old Navy store and the ABC cameras was running. The brother gets out his Cadillac truck and leisurely walks into the Old Navy store, which had been penetrated. He then comes out with some bags. He then takes off. The sisters had pulled up behind him. She gets out, walks gingerly to the store, comes out with bags, puts them in her car, and the ABC cameras are focused right on her license plate. I mean, is this naivety? And they think, oh, it was a riot, therefore it's not a crime for me to steal?
Wow.
And you're stealing junk. Now, we're not meeting anywhere, and this is the problem I got with all these protests. These protests are fake. First of all, I think this whole riot thing was concocted and organized by some third rail, because black people in Chicago ain't that organized. They ain't that organized to go downtown, the Magnificent Mile, and break out stuff. And then they had trucks. They break out in them beautiful stores. Then a truck.
So agent provocateurs is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
And getting these Negroes caught up. And the ultimate bamboozlement. And what's going to be their legal defense? I can hear the lawyers, and I don't practice no more, but I can hear the lawyers, well, sir, why did you do this? Man, I thought it was all good. They knocked the door down. They knocked the windows out. I figured I'd just go in and get me some of this stuff. It was just right there, and anybody could get it, so I figured I was entitled to it, too. Penitentiary time. Because they own the mayor, the black mayor, and they own the black state's attorney. The black state's attorney has been very cool. But the black mayor is a former prosecutor. So she won't want to throw him in the dungeon for messing up her city and her reputation. Because, the president gets on the TV and says Chicago is out of control. Yes, yeah. Chicago is out of control because there's no money here. There's no resources for black people here. And now we have bunches of people who want to call themselves leaders. And we used to call them, a friend of mine told me the other day, in the 60s, we used to call them pop-up leaders, pop-up guys.
Right.
Now, we had a brother the other day. He said he's a rabbi. Now, a friend of mine is a rabbi. Went to rabbinical school and everything. I know he a rabbi. I went to synagogue and watched him do his first sermon. I don't know who this brother was. He's going to lead a group of black people down the expressway.
The Dan Ryan Expressway?
Yes. And for what? Because this is a way to get attention. This is not a way to bring some identity to a problem. The problem exists. It really don't need no identity. And the young brother who wrote the book, The Black Tax, I'm trying to think his last name, Sean, his first name, did a brilliant job on this. All of them Negroes need to be doing is reading that book.
Right.
The brother has already laid out the discrepancies in the economic system. If they're going to have a meeting, they should be meeting and talking about that. How we going to correct this? But all this emotionalism, and let me say this. See, you have to watch it because they'll bamboozle you at all costs. Like the poor sister that got killed in Louisville. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
The one.
Right, Breonna. Mm-hmm.
Breonna, what's her last name? Taylor,
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Breonna. This is the catch on that case. I'm sitting back analyzing. I'm saying, okay, what happened here? First of all, some policemen, they want to indict the police. The policemen were given a no-knock warrant. Now, the policemen have nothing to do with it. Just think about this like it's in the Army. a soldier is given an order, go take Pork Chop Hill, even though it might not make no sense. But it's not the soldier's job to say, well, I don't know. I don't know if we should take Pork Chop Hill, Captain. So they give these guys a no-knock warrant. And what a no-knock warrant means, that the person you're going to try to arrest is considered armed and extremely dangerous. Because most warrants, you have to knock on the door and say, the police will come let us in, and if they don't let you in, then you kick the door in, right? But a no-knock warrant says the person you're seeking is armed and dangerous and considered extremely dangerous. So the police go to the spot. They didn't do the warrant. Somebody gave them the warrant. They go to the spot. They're going to knock the door in because they got a no-knock warrant, right? They don't know Brother Man is in there with a legal gun. So Brother Man don't know who they are. He just knows somebody kicking in the door. And him and his lady is in there. He's like, wow, let me get my gun. So he shoots. They return fire. And the sister gets killed. So why you going to arrest them? The problem was higher up the chain. The guy they was looking for hadn't lived there at that address in years and was at that moment incarcerated.
My goodness.
That's not what the police on the street know. They don't know none of that. So you're spending all this energy talking about put them on trial. They got a defense. Any lawyer worth his salt and tried any kind of case can defend them and beat that. Because they like soldiers. So they should be protesting. Who did the warrant? You ain't heard nobody ask. Who prepared the warrant?
And why? And why?
And why?
And why they didn't check the address and to find out that the person they were looking for, that should have been able to be in somebody's computer, right. That the person you're looking for is already incarcerated.
That's right. But now
we have enough technology to have that already.
That's right. That's right. But nobody's talking about that. That's what makes us look stupid.
No one has ever mentioned that. Actually, you're the first person that I've heard discuss the fact that it was a no-knock warrant and who issued it and why was it issued.
That's correct. They should be going up the chain saying, we want this person fired. Everybody can get sued now. They have no shield from getting sued. And when I say that, I mean the police department can get sued easy because they were just wrong as to left shoe. But it's different getting sued civilly as opposed to trying to bring criminal action against somebody. Mm-hmm. Okay?
But let me ask you a question in relationship to that, though. Given the argument, actually, the position that you are taking, that folk are being derailed in terms of their understanding of what the real problems are, in terms of the reality. And so what you are saying to our listeners is that people are being steered in a direction that somebody else wants them to be steered in for a purpose that's not in their best interest. That's really what you're saying, right?
That's correct. And they're steering them to waste all this good, positive energy. These people have good, positive energy.
And it needs to be channeled in a more positive direction.
That's
what
correct.
You're saying.
See, their energy is good because, first of all, they're challenging the system. They're saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? You keep killing people. You keep killing our men. And sometimes you even kill our women. What the hell y'all doing? That's a valid, good question.
But it's being orchestrated outside of their control, is what you're saying, so that they can get a desired result that is not necessarily in the best interest of the people who have legitimate argument and have the right to exercise their protest. So what you are saying, which is very, very interesting, is that a group of people are being manipulated to achieve an outcome. We're not sure exactly what it is, or we know what it is, but not being manifested, that would take them really away from the legitimacy of the argument that they have for which they are effectuating and protesting for meaningful change.
That's correct. That's exactly what is happening. The same thing happened in the 60s.
Right, exactly.
And the blueprint is still intact.
Right.
And we are naive because we
still
keep
falling for
trying
the
to be.
okie doke.
Yeah, well, first of all, that's right. But first of all, that's right. But first of all, listen. This is my bottom line theory. If you walk out your door every day, or you wake up every day, and you think you're a citizen, you already lost. You've already lost because you're not. Now, I saw a video with the great ancestor Malcolm X, and he was talking to a guy in 1964 and said the same thing. They said, "But you guys are citizens." He said, "How you gonna be a citizen? You gotta have a Voting Rights Act. You gotta have a Civil Rights Act." He said, "Ain't no other group had that." Now, when I was saying it at first, I didn't know Brother Malcolm had said it. But I felt much better when I found out. I said, wow, I must have been channeling the brother. Because this is logic. See, and what you have to do is differentiate your training from reality. You were trained, I was trained. And that training leads you to certain conclusions that are not in your best interest. Okay? Now, your training is telling you something wrong with this whole COVID-19 thing. There's something wrong. You don't know exactly what's wrong. But you know this protocol is not what viruses do. They told us in the beginning. They told us back in March. Well, in the summer, the heat will dissipate the virus. The heat seems to have exacerbated the virus here in Illinois. Because when they
and everywhere else, because people are throwing caution to the wind. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. Because as it got hotter here, and people said, "Oh, I got to go outside," and people was having, and this is what gets me. You as psychiatrists are one of the world's greatest, but how and why would you have a COVID party? These young people here was having COVID parties. And throwing caution to the wind, not wearing no face mask, and they would pop up and be hundreds of them. They said, "We're having a COVID party." And one young man, they got him on TV. He said, "Yeah, they just had a COVID party here last night." And he said hardly any of them were wearing masks. And he was shaking his head. He was shaking his head, saying, "This seemed a little stupid to me." Because some people did get infected after they left the COVID party.
Yes.
See, this kind of behavior is that which is being orchestrated by other people for their benefit. Because if they can kill you without having to shoot you, cause any kind of controversy, blame it on the virus, you can't see the virus, you can't hear the virus, you can't even taste this virus, then they can say it's divine providence. They can call
it's part of depopulation, the whole depopulation thing,
absolutely.
In terms of resource allocation?
Absolutely. Look at the places in the world where it's hitting the heaviest. India, you know, they got all them people. They don't care about killing some folks. Brazil, where they have that heavy concentration of people in a smaller area. Because Brazil, though it's big on one level, it's not that big for the population that it has. The density of the population is pretty bad. I mean, if you ever see a favela, you know what I'm talking about.
I've been, yeah.
And so they don't, and they had disregard for people's lives. A couple of my friends were there in '92, and they actually witnessed the police shoot and kill a man, and just left him there to be picked up by a street sweeper or whatever.
Especially those of African descent, especially the Afro-Brazilian, yes.
And in 1992, they told my partners, this is the first time we ever had a conference. They let us talk about being black. 1992.
Mm-hmm.
So, check that out. And I remember so vividly, my great ancestor, my daddy, he had his own business. He had his own accounting business. He had a degree and all that stuff in it. But there was a sister sitting in his office one day. Somebody had brought her there. She was from Brazil. She was a dark-skinned sister, vehemently stating, and I knew this was a lie, well, we don't have no racism like y'all do in Brazil. We don't have it. And I said, wait a minute, have you ever heard of Brother Nascimento?
Mm-hmm.
And she looked at me like, no, I don't know. See, the now is worldwide for the African. They must keep the African in his state of bamboozlement because the African just center is so great. The Africans in the United States of America alone probably account for 50% of the cultural variations in the world. You can probably go to Slovenia and somebody gonna be rapping.
That's true. That's a fact. I mean, I travel all over the world, and I do know that the rapping, hip hop, our music, also reggae, is all over the world, and
right.
We do have an influence, cultural influence that we, at least here in this country, don't recognize to the degree of how powerful an impact that we have. Now, we got only about 4 minutes left that we can get into this. I mean, it looks like you're going to be coming back for a third time, brother. But
any time for you, Doc.
Okay, well, but what before we leave our listening audience with one thing between now and when you come back that they need to be doing in order to deal with this bamboozlement.
Well, very simply stated, the late great ancestor, Dr. Bobby E. Wright, probably the greatest psychologist we've ever created, psychologists as opposed to psychiatrists. But
right.
He used to say to us, black people need to be doing more talking to each other. He says, you hear people all the time saying, it's too much talk and not enough action. He said, how you going to have action if you ain't talking? Black people need to get together and start having honest and frank discussions.
So talking to each other and not at each other, huh?
That's correct. And instead of having marches, which don't benefit nobody but the shoe company and the hotels and when there were restaurants, they need to be talking to each other about what is happening in their lives. They need to be doing, Doc, what y'all do as psychiatrists, get people to talk. I find overwhelmingly that black people don't talk to each other, don't discuss issues, and then when it comes down to it, they make horrendous decisions based on the inappropriate analysis of information. It's paralyzing. So if we just start talking, and then after we start talking, I would suggest that the audience think about one or two of them. You don't need no whole group. See, that group thing will slow you down. One or two of you or three of you get together and figure out, well, what can we sell?
Right.
It might be juicy fruit sticks at first.
Okay.
Don't look at it like it's big. In your area where you live, what do your people want and like? And try to figure out how you can sell it to them. Because that's what everybody else does in the world. They come here and try to figure out, what can we sell them blacks so we can make money? There's a little...
Hi, I'm Attorney Anthony Muhammad. I want to thank everyone out there for staying tuned and listening to WSYP-LP 95.1 Sankofa Radio. Media has never been more consolidated. 6 media giants now control a staggering 90% of what we read, watch, and listen to. In 1983, 90% of American media was owned by 50 companies. In 2011, the same 90% is controlled by 6 companies. 232 media executives control the informational diet of 277 million Americans. To continue to listen to WSYP-LP 95.1 Sankofa Radio, we want to be a part of bringing you that news from an African-centered perspective. Continue to listen to WSYP-LP 95.1 Sankofa Radio. We're asking that you send your donations to keep these programming up and running to P.O. Box 362151, Birmingham, Alabama 35236.
Life's a losing gamble to me. Cares and woes have got me moaning. Every evening find me moaning. I'm alone and crying the blues. I'm so tired of paying these dues. Everybody knows I'm moaning. Lord, I spend plenty of days and nights alone my grief. But I pray, really and truly pray, somebody will come and bring me relief. Every morning find me moaning, 'cause of all the trouble I seen. Life's a losing gamble to me. Everybody knows I'm moaning.
All right. Everybody knows I'm moaning too. I can't stand it. All righty. That was, of course, Jose James with Moanin', the great classical jazz tune. I just thought I'd play it because I think we're all in the same mood. We all feel like we need to go someplace and just moan at what is going on in our country. Well, that brings us to the introduction to our program today. By the way, I'm your Trace Lead, and this is Lead Stories, L-E-I-D, Stories. And let's get started. All kinds of craziness is going on in this country at the moment, and it's only going to get worse, but it will be fast moving. That's the only good thing I think we could expect, that things will move along quickly as November the 3rd, Election Day, rolls around, and we get this over with. Whatever it is that's supposed to happen, let's get it happening and see where we go from there. We have the Supreme Court justice being examined today. I don't even want to talk about that just yet, and for good reason. And it's a psychological thing. It's a psychological thing. Something big is happening in the country. Okay, we get that. There's a new U.S. Supreme Court justice being evaluated for membership on the court. There's a lot of hubbub about it. I understand that too. But you know what? Over the weekend in particular, I decided I am not going to have these folks crowd my mind. I need my own space. All right? You're not going to crowd my mind with your agenda. I'm sick of it. So that everybody's talking about this or everybody's talking about that, and there is a predetermined outcome that you should work toward. And I'm not going to do that. This is the one thing I've insisted about this program. You have your own mind. We should use it and protect it. It's our sovereign territory. So we do not have to go with the flow. We do not have to talk about what everybody else is talking about. Because when we get ready to talk about it, you will find that it's as different as night and day. The way the rest of the world sees things and the way we see things. So I'm not dealing with the U.S. Supreme Court or any of that today. I'm going down our own road. And we will talk about signs that President Trump and his campaign are bracing themselves for bad news at the polls on November the 3rd. Are you getting any signs that they're bracing themselves for bad news on November the 3rd, despite all of the activity and all of the meetings being held and all of the rallies being held and speeches being given and interviews being played all over the place? All of the Trump people, everybody named Trump, has been dispersed to different media outlets to get the word out about how Donald Trump is being wronged, but how he will win, just to say it. But when you look closely at what they're saying, you get a sense that quietly they're very despondent and they don't like what they're seeing. And it looks as if they expect bad news at the polls on November the 3rd. So we start off with that today. In your view, from what you are observing in media, in terms of media coverage, are you seeing signs that Trump and his campaign are bracing themselves for bad news at the polls on November the 3rd? And if so, what are those signs that you're seeing? 888-874-4888. Ed from Jamaica, you start us off today.
Yeah, good afternoon, Utrice. How you doing?
Okay, Ed. How are you?
Me and the thumbs, we're here.
You and your thumbs.
Me and my thumbs. I know that gives you a tickle when you picture me hanging from a room somewhere by my thumbs. As far as, I really wanted to. I'm not going to take you off topic because I know that you're a stickler for that, and I appreciate that. This is your show. But my name was taken into a lot of people's mouths last week, and I wanted to address that. But Maybe that'll save that for another time.
Go ahead.
I'll save that for another time. I'm gonna stay on topic.
Okay.
Trump, is he one of the signs that he's expecting a negative outcome at the polls? Well, I mean, it's hard to tell with this guy because he's so unhinged that everything seems to be a panic action. According to the polls, he's going to do poorly. I mean, he's concentrating on the battleground states. His people are knocking on doors and making inroads to these battleground states, trying to get the people that got him elected 4 years earlier to come out again. But he's got a huge campaign against him. His behavior is manifesting, showing that he really doesn't care about the people as far as how he's handled his own infection with the coronavirus, if you want to believe that, which I think is dubious at best, because the man is a notorious liar. Be that as it may, he's I think he feels threatened. I think they've got to contingency plan with the Supreme Court. I also think they've got a contingency plan with the delegates. They've got a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. If the race is relatively close enough, it could go down. It could come down to like it did in Florida with Bush, and it could come down to the Supreme Court deciding. And he's setting himself up with that by rushing this nominee through. They can also do a delegate stealing type of thing, where states can agree to, even though the popular vote doesn't bear in his favor, they can have their delegates vote for Trump based on whether it's a red state or a blue state. So there are a lot of little tricks with the Electoral College and with the Supreme Court that he can pull in a tight decision. So I think that's what his people are looking at, and I don't think he's going to. If he does lose with a large percentage, or if he doesn't win the Electoral College, I think he'll gracefully go out. I think people are a little bit too afraid of this guy. America is a system. America is a business, and there are fail safes and prevent somebody from becoming a monarch and taking over. Like I said, we get mad at the puppets, but we don't get mad at the puppet masters, which is that small elite that actually control this whole thing and who these people are behooving to. So, like I said, it all depends on how this election goes. If it's close, I think they'll play Supreme Court games. I think they'll play Electoral College games. We got to keep a close eye on the leisure domain or sleight of hand, if you will, that's going to go on with this. If it's an overwhelming win for Biden and Harris, I don't think there'll be too much playing around. But if there's a razor's edge or if there's a closeness to it, they'll definitely try to shuffle the deck. But the sad part is, either way, both sides aren't doing anything for us. And that's the real sad part. Like I said, we get mad at the puppets. We got to start getting mad at the puppet masters.
Amen. Let me ask you another question, a related question. If you think that there are signs that Trump will not accept defeat if he loses at the election, what do you think he's likely to do? And what is the response? And what will the response be from key sectors of civilian life or from the government? What is it likely to be?
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest. I don't think he's not that powerful. And people don't, America is a business. It's been around for over 200 years. The powers that be, the people that control the government, are not going to let you screw it up. They'll let you do certain things. They'll let you portray wild thoughts. But once you start to get close to the core of power, once you start to become a threat to commerce, become a threat to the corporation that is America, they take you out. They'll put a bullet in you. They did it to Lincoln. They did it to Kennedy. I mean, if he was really that much of a threat, if they thought that he really carried that much influence to start something in this country, he'd be dead. because they're not going to let somebody upset the status quo. That's what people don't realize. This country is a status quo country. Calvin Coolidge said it nearly a century ago, and it's still true today. The business of America is business. And as long as you can do whatever you want, as long as you don't influence business, we all right. Martin Luther King could ask for civil rights all day long. When he started talking about human rights, when he started talking about the poor, when he started to amass a front of Poor People's Campaign, that's when they took that man out. When Kennedy started to acknowledge the people and started to acknowledge the poor and started to unite people on a common front and point out who the real enemies are, they take you out. So, I mean, Trump is a buffoon, but he's no, there won't be any type of civil war or anything behind him. Those goons in what was it, Minnesota trying to take the governor, the FBI has people planted in everything. From the days of COINTELPRO to the days of Timothy McVeigh. And if you don't think they didn't know what was going on and just waited for the right time to move on them, they did. They got CIs, they got civilian informants. They're planted in everything. Every time I go to a movement, I watch around and see who's who and who's what, because you got to pay attention. They got their claws in everything, and they're not going to let things get out of hand.
It's not that bad with you. Oh, Lord. Okay, well, thank you. You addressed both questions that I posed to you today. But let's see how it all works out. I'm sure we will get additional hints between now and November 3rd as to the answers to these two questions. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Ed. Sorry.
Thank you.
Bill, you're on the air at 888-874-4888.
Teresa, and to all in the listening audience. And I rarely agree with most of what Ed says, but I think he's right on point on some things today, and that Trump will be out of office if he loses. He is a bully. All bullies, have all this braggadocio about what they're going to do and all this. He will be leaving office, and I wish Biden would say that directly to him. You are out, and the Constitution mandates it. And no matter what the Supreme Court does, I mean, certainly if it's overwhelming, the man will be out of office.
Mandate it, does it?
Pardon?
The Constitution doesn't mandate that Trump should be out.
I think there's a procedure that, for the transfer of power that, once a president or once contestants lose an election, that they've lost. So, I mean, I don't think there's any wiggle room around that. I mean, he can't just lose an election and think he's going to stay.
Well, that is correct. I thought, okay, all right, that is correct.
And so, but in his